This is the Real Estate Power Play Podcast, getting you the information that you need to be a successful real estate investor. Hosted by Mark Monroe, Ronald Walker, Gabe Rodarte, and me, Marty Grizzanti. Combined, we've done thousands of real estate transactions. So get ready for real stories and true case studies on finding deals, growing portfolios, and making money. Welcome to the show.
All right, guys. Hey, what's happening? This is Gabe with the Real Estate Power Play Podcast, coming to you with my man, Mark Monroe. And we have a special guest today, Charlie Cow, coming to you.
Well, actually, it's Charlie Gao. So I actually should have said this beforehand too. It's spelled with K.
Dude, now we have to now we have to do the whole thing over again, Charlie.
I know,
we
man.
have to start
but we gotta get the name right, though. We gotta get the
talking about here.
Started, so.
Oh my goodness. All right, now,
so guys,
how do you
pronounce it?
What?
How do you pronounce it? What's the proper pronouncing?
It's pronounced with a G sound, so like G-A. You give like G-O-W, like cow.
Dude, I have a good friend of mine with the G. It is Gao.
Yeah.
I just didn't even think about cow. I just thought
so people who come to the United States now, because nobody pronounces my name right. Everybody calls me a farm animal. Pronounce it or spell it G-A-O now. But because when I moved, they basically didn't know how to spell it, and so they spell it K-A-O. So.
Oh, I got it.
So have you guys ever seen like Peking duck?
Mm-hmm.
So P-E-K-I-N-G, that was the original spelling for Beijing. And then they realized like, hey, nobody's gonna pronounce it right because it looks like Peking. So that's why the K sounds are supposed to be G sounds from Chinese, but they've changed it now where it's actually phonetically.
So we changed the language.
Yeah, because I actually went to my dad. I was like, hey, Dad, can we change our last name to G-O, kind of like my other friend that has the same last name, actually?
Totally.
And my dad was like, oh, hell no. Like, we're not doing anything. I was like, okay, so.
Man, I like that, though. Let me just change my last name. Oh, man. All right. Well, hey, guys, welcome to the Real Estate Power Play. We're going to keep going live here. We have Mark Monroe, Charlie Gao, and we're going to just come bring it to you and bring the thunder today. So, guys, normally we come to you once a week, sometimes twice a week. Mark and I just did a special alert podcast with seller financing, just did a quick 30-minute of telling you different ways that it's going to be needed in this next season. Debt takeover, stuff like that. So guys, all types of good information. Follow us, YouTube, all that jazz. So let's jump into this. Mark, how you been, man?
I'm great, but I'm super excited that Charles on here and hear all about his story and dive right into it and learn about his background. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so long story short, my dad moved to the United States in his late 30s. He could not speak much English at all, so he had to find a job for somebody who could teach him, in Chinese. And he got a job as basically a handyman general contractor for a woman that owned a bunch of commercial property. And then one day she didn't have one of her chefs show up to work at one of the restaurants that she owned. And so he's like, I can do it. And she was like, well, why do you think you can do it? He's like, I've been watching him do it. So she was like, all right, well, let's see what you can do. He tried out for it, and he basically got the job. But then she was like, the problem, though, is I need you more as a contractor right now than I need you at this restaurant. And he's like, well, that's fine. I'll do both. And so really what he meant by doing both is, yeah, I'll get my son who's free slave labor to do everything. So outside of taking me out of school for extended time, I pretty much was his free grunt labor for, the next decade of my life after that going forward. And so my exposure to real estate was really more on the general contracting side. The other thing actually that I got a lot of exposure to, which I didn't really realize how beneficial it was at the time, is that, I remember I had to translate a lot of documents for my dad. I'd be in the room with the lawyer, like playing their Transformers or whatever, while they would ask me questions like, hey, tell your dad this or whatnot. And so ultimately, we have a brokerage side to our business. It's amazing how much of a strong legal background I have because I've been translating legal documents for my dad since I was 12 years old. So
Wow. Okay, cool. So what is the background that you're coming from doing that? So you were doing the contractor, you were the rehab crews, or
I
what was
was
that?
breaking every OSHA law possible, every child labor law you could think of. That was me. I was the kid that was tied to a tree with a chainsaw. I was the guy that was on top of a roof where
I
people were
know
like,
this life, bro.
why is that kid on top of a roof, like doing, like with hot tar wax, things like that. So,
I know this life. This is good. This is good. We have a similar background. So my parents had a cabinet shop, and it was so freaking hot. We're in Houston, Texas, so it's so
oh,
freaking
yeah.
hot. But I was in there around 12 years old. I shouldn't be around saws, I guess nowadays, or anything, sanding, staining, all that jazz. So
So did you have to work at like 5 a.m? Because I remember one time I was complaining about how hot it was. My dad's like, "Oh, okay, let's wake up at 3 a.m. when it's
yeah,
nice
that
and
was the
cool."
thing. We would have to get up
Yeah.
even earlier to get there so that way we could beat the
Yeah.
heat, and then we'd take a break, and then we'd come, like I'm talking a 2-hour break, and then we'd come back after because the shop was cooler. So, oof, man. Okay, so how did that transfer over to now? Like, what's today looking like? What are you doing now? What's your thing now?
Yeah, so I got out of real estate altogether. I was like, real estate sucks. I don't want to be lifting toilets and like doing clean outs. This
Get
is
it?
horrible. And then I worked as a strength and conditioning coach at 2 Division I universities. I worked in commercial lending. I also worked in med tech and pharmaceutical sales. And I would say once I got into my commercial lending job and I saw how much people were making in real estate and how people were actually like making real money in real estate, but not like running it the way my dad, which was just heavy operator, do everything ourselves. I realized, I'm making a ton of money for whatever bank I'm working at or whatever company I'm working for. I'm getting 0.001% of that. If I do this for myself, if I invest in myself, like a Fortune 500 company or like I'm doing for this company, I'm pretty confident I can make a lot of money too as well. So that's kind of what happened. I just grinded at real estate, 40 hours a week at real estate, 40 hours a week in my other job. And I just grinded out insane hours for a number of years. And then slowly over time, like I built relationships that made my W-2 jobs easier. And then I also put more systems in place to make my real estate business funnel. And I think one of the reasons why my real estate business was so explosive was because I was living off of only half of half of basically my income. And then anything that came from real estate, if I flipped a house for $40,000, that was 100% going back into real estate. And then on top of that, even when I was making like, over 130,000 a year, I was still living off of only $65,000 a year for the longest time. So
Wow.
I was just grinding out, living it well below cost of living. As you can see, I don't got the Mona Lisa in my background. I got a filing cabinet, but I'm a low key guy. And, and that kind of also translates to the type of investors I have in. So right now, Twin Oaks Capital, my firm I'm a principal for. We do pretty much everything from brokerage and consulting to raising capital and building construction management to even asset management for our clients. There's not really any aspect of the business we don't do. And a lot of that's because my background was so diverse. I had the building construction background from my dad's. I even kind of had I want to say legal background, but I mean, I saw a lot of legal documents by the time I turned 18 just from all my dad's business. And then I had commercial lending background, which that commercial lending background also allowed me to do some of my own private lending too as well. And then brokerage wise, we also found an opportunity with brokerage where we are deals that we pass off on primarily because they're too small. We're selling to clients of ours as well.
Sweet.
So what in today's environment, what are you guys mainly focusing on, the way that we're going into 2023 here? What do you guys see and what's your main focus?
So I'm most well known for self-storage. I'm actually speaking at the ISS World Expo in April. I have a YouTube channel that's primarily focused around self-storage, but I actually do have a pretty diverse following. I think it's just because our explosive returns in the last 3 years have really come from self-storage, so that's come to the forefront. But I'm actually probably a little bit more balanced than what people think. I have industrial, I have mobile home park, I have multifamily, I have assisted living. Pretty much how my portfolio looks is that anything that's in West Michigan or in a market that I'm heavily in, I am the owner operator for. Anything that I'm more of a passive investor or LP on is out of state. And so the really the only two criteria I have, but it absolutely can't be criteria broken, is I'm only investing in areas typically with very strong population growth and diversity, and it's got to have a strong, basically economic background. So job diversity, growth, and then also basically rising demand across the board. I will not break that rule anywhere. I could buy a 15 cap in a tertiary market. I won't do that. I want to buy markets that I know that even if I bought wrong, for example, 5 years from now, because the population is going to double, I have that ultimate fail safe to balance me out there.
That's awesome, man. No, that's good because one, you're in West Michigan. I'm originally from Michigan, so that's kind of cool. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great state as far as like the weather and everything goes. It's probably really nice right now. So
I think it's not too bad actually. So oddly enough, we had a huge polar vortex, and I was Florida in the middle of that, so I haven't seen snow yet this year.
Oh wow! Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah, but it's actually been a pretty mild winter, so I'm not.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, but interesting enough, like my wife and I were just talking about this, but I have 2 vacation homes in my primary home, and my 2 vacation homes are significantly larger than my primary home, and so we've been spending a lot of time at those 2 vacation homes as of lately. So
that's cool, man. So I like when you talk about your investor model and your strategy. You do storage facilities, which is really cool stuff, and it's like a hot market that people haven't known about for a while, and now all of a sudden, like everybody's all into it. They're excited. It's a big topic right now, and I got a couple really good friends down here that are my go-to storage guys. So we pretty much JV on storage, and we go into that down here. I like how you're talking about what you do that's local compared to what you do that's outside of your normal area, like like other states and other markets that you're in. So as far as storage facilities, how are you looking at those right now? Are they changing? Is there just a different model that you're starting to use that you're like, you know what, we've had to adapt over the years?
Yeah, so the question I get so often is, what asset class do you like? And I'm like, well, it depends, because if I won't invest in this market for any asset class because it's tertiary populating declining. So nationwide as a whole, I do like self-storage, but there are definitely markets in this country that are overbuilt. Like right now, even though there is explosive growth, Austin, Texas is an area that is overbuilt for self-storage right now. So I want to invest there. So with self-storage, the criteria that I have more specifically beyond that is it's got to be 50,000 square feet or more. And then it's also got to have those strong economic indicators. And then generally, based on my cost to build, I'm looking for a blended rate across the facility of 80 cents a square foot. So based on where I can build at, I know that if I can get a blended rate across all my units of 80 cents a square foot, that's kind of my criteria I'm looking for. Outside of that, though, it can be indoor storage. It can be climate control, which climate control has a different price than I have to factor in for my blended rate. So that's kind of how I look at it as a totality there. Like, I like, for example, like Grand Rapids is a strong market. I would rather invest in an assisted living facility in Grand Rapids than investing in self-storage in Austin, simply because even though I know self-storage really well, a little bit better than I know assisted living in that class, I know that this market is very susceptible to absorbing more senior housing because of our population growth, in particular in that 55 and up population too as well. So I used to do a lot of data mining, data analysis type of stuff. And then I did some deals that whoa, it's not matching what I put on paper. And so I'm a lot more of a fundamentalist now than I used to be. I used to analyze numbers, and it's like, oh, numbers don't lie. I'm like, well, yeah, they can't lie because you need to understand underlying things. Like, if one of the largest employer in your county might potentially be laying 2,000 people off, there's no really economic indicators of what that's going to do for your numbers, but we just all inherently know that, hey, if 10% of the workforce is getting laid off, this economy is going to be in a recession, right? So those are the kind of things that I'm looking for.
So do you look for a minimum population when you're looking at these? And also how do you determine on the population? Do you do it on a per square footage, on how many storage facilities? What's your math look like, or your how you underwrite that?
So on a national number, we rely on numbers much more, or also specifically if we are looking to sell to a fund or if we are bringing stuff to investors. So I have deals that if you did the typical desktop study for it, look absolutely terrible on paper. But I know because of certain characteristics, like so you mentioned minimum population. I don't have minimum population requirements except for the fact that it's got to be growing. So if it's only 200 people, then it's got to be growing more than 10% to really make a wow for me. But at the same time, one of my markets I'm invested in has only 2,000 people. But if you go there on a summer day, there's 7 lakes around that area. I can tell you that there's probably 2,000 people on each of those 7 lakes alone. So the population is misleading because you have a very affluent population that stores RVs, boats, all their toys from there, and a lot of times they're renting like 1,000 to 2,000 square feet of self storage from us from different usages. So from that aspect, like it really comes down to what I said before, that the reason why I like to invest in my markets and be the operator is because I know all the things. I know Ionia, Michigan has a prison, so I can't use their entire population there because 1/10 of that population comes from the prison, right? Whereas if I go to Florida, I don't know that market. I gotta rely on my numbers more. But my philosophy is that when I invest in out-of-state market, I'm investing in an operator because they have an unfair advantage. They know their market better than anybody. I know, like, hey, I sit on a ton of boards in the area, so I know, hey, if a road is going to go in, I might know it a year or two before some other people might know it because of rumblings or whatnot. So maybe that's an opportunity for me to think long term about what I want to do in that area. Obviously, I got to be aware of some insider trading rules and things like that too, potentially. But those are all things I have as an advantage locally. So that's why my philosophy is the way it is, because when you invest with me in my market, if you are an investor, I have every unfair advantage possible. I know all the engineers. I know everybody here locally. I know who basically I got to pay to get what done. I know, hey, I can use this engineer for something cheap, but I need this engineer because this engineer's got the city councilman person in their back pocket. I got all those things there. When I go out of state, I'm investing in an operator that I know that has those same unfair advantages, and that's why I'm investing in, because now they're creating value for me. Because you look at my market, I bill probably 20% cheaper than anybody else, especially if they're coming from out of state. And that's because all my contractors are local. I know my market so well. I know where I can get everybody through. And so as a result, if my investors give me 20% equity, they're not really giving up anything, right? They're really just right where they're supposed to be, because if they did it themselves, they would lose all that advantage that I'm giving up to them with what I have for economies of scale.
Man, there's so much information there that I don't want this to go over some of the people's heads with, and not to be rude to anybody who's listening to this, but I want to unpack some of this, because this is the things that we work on in my local market. I have, I might have the capital, but I'm in the Houston MSA area. It's a huge marketplace, right? This is, I know you're talking about your market mainly being West Michigan, which is mainly what, Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo area.
Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, to some in Ottawa County, it's like Grand Haven. Not as much Muskegon, just because we don't get the it's not really part of our plan, but it could be eventually in the future.
Okay. Okay, cool. So you have all this stuff, and then so what I'm learning also is the fact of having someone, and it didn't occur to me until last quarter, of going, why don't I just find a great operator even in my own backyard, because Houston's so big. The counties, you got to know people within the counties and stuff like that. And so, hey, why don't we just work with somebody who knows this area really well? And the more you dig into this, now we have new developments, we have all types of stuff happening. I'm in mainly North Houston when it comes to stuff like that. And when we do, you got to know who to talk to, what engineer to talk to, what land surveyor to talk to, who you're going to connect with, what builder who's going to help you build the product. Are you going to are we doing the whole thing of where we want to go to someone with 20% off the normal, or do we want to go to someone who's like 10% off, but they handle everything for us?
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a lot of different moving parts on there. And I don't know if anyone really sees that, right? In reality of saying, hey, this is what happens when you're building in areas. So to dig into that more, how long does it take for newer folk to go, okay, listen, this is what you're really going to need to do? Is there an advice or a step program that you would handle, or that you would hand out to somebody saying, hey, if you want to get into this type of development, you need to know these type of people in the beginning.
No, I mean, that's the tough thing about it is that you don't know what questions to ask unless you know to ask them, which, I mean, so it's which one comes first, the chicken or the egg, right? So our firm, one of the reasons why we kind of came full circle is because we kept finding ways to add value. So like I'm part of a brokerage that's really a residential brokerage. It's not a Colliers, it's not a CBRE, so I don't have that name for it. So people often ask like, how do I compete with that firm? So I'll use it as kind of an example. Like we had a client that came to me with a listing that said, hey, I want $12 million for this listing. So myself and other BPOs kind of came in. I was kind of on the lower end of BPOs, but ultimately nobody came close to that. But then I took it one step further with our company and said, listen, we will do this with our usual one, but we'll also offer you an opportunity to asset manage your portfolio. So essentially what happened is that 12 million is what they wanted. It could be worth 12 million, but we need to raise rents and we need to prove your concept because they were saying we can get $1,300 rents. I'm like, okay, well, where's the comps? There isn't any, but I actually did agree with them. So then what we did is we went in and I said, give me 4 units, give me this budget. We will renovate those units out and then we will get topped out like we show and we'll show people concept. Okay. We did it with 4 out of the 47 units. So now if you do this value add and stuff, we finishing it, this is how much equity left over. And so that was what allowed us to basically sell that deal and take it over from brokers. That's how we were able to compete with like a Colliers or a CBRE. A lot of the Colliers CBRE guys, some of them are not investors at all. They're just brokerage guys. So we were able to do it too as well. And so, but that expertise doesn't really come unless you want to learn it. So really the only way you can learn these things is if you grind it out. Like I know one mistake I made kind of going back with an engineer. We had an engineer that was, we knew he could do the job easily. He was kind of fresh out of college, only 2 years, but it was a super, super simple job. It was basically get prefab containers approved on this site. And that was it. I mean, we had engineering plans from the prefab container company, kept going back to the city, and then coming to find out the city, there are 3 people that we had a contact that were kind of lower admin people. They kept quitting and losing jobs, and so we kept restarting over. And so finally, like we did get it through, and then we got denied, and then we got denied again. And so we went back to this other company that's a nationally known company that's really well known locally. They quoted us 5 times more than this other guy did to do it initially. Wow. And then what happened is we went back to them, and they're like, oh, yeah, we'll do it. And they basically did it for the exact same cost. They used other plans that we already had in place. They made a couple of calls, and they basically superseded those people that we were having problems with because they just went above them because they had those connections. 2 weeks later, we got our approval. So did we ever really save $32,000, or would we have even if that guy we paid $8,000 did it, even if he did it, but he took a year to do it, did we even save any money? No. And so those are just kind of things that, you kind of have to balance. You don't know necessarily, but you kind of have kind of reasonably things to expect. If I'm doing something that's 100% approved by the city, they give us awesome feedback, then yeah, I probably don't need to use an engineer that basically is super experienced and has the connections. But if I get feedback from the city, like, I don't know, you're right, run into these issues, then I might need to talk with that more expensive engineer to know, 1, do I want to get into this in the first place? And 2, can you leverage your connections to get this approved for us? Because that's what I'm really asking. I'm not asking you to do engineering plans. I'm asking, can you use your connections to get it done when nobody else can get it done? So that would be
how many times let's just say if this happens 10 times, how many out of those 10 times are you going, man, it's all about the connections?
It's tough hard to say. Like, one of the things I always tell people too is that cost is not the actual money you pay. Cost is also related to basically the hassles and the time.
This is exactly what the direction I wanted to go into, though. So that's why I was kind of digging in. And the reason why I'm saying this is not for you to be specific with it, but to let the audience know, like, this actually happens more often than what you know, of going, you know what, it's kind of 50% of the time. You're going to need to have someone on your team who has these connections so you can just save time.
Yeah. I mean, like, so for example, my core 3 guys, my excavator, my concrete guy, and my either asphalt or my video camera. So it's actually kind of 4. They all work with each other almost on every single deal. So I can tell you that I could maybe save $30,000-$40,000 on it. Even if I saved $100,000, it doesn't make sense. Because you think about it, I'm GC my own deal. So if I'm the general contractor, I'm doing the building construction management, I'm doing a $4 million build. And let's say that my normal fee is $400,000. Well, if I just pass it off to these guys that, hey, they're $100,000 more, but I'm still saving $300,000. But hey, Mark, excavator guy, call the concrete guy. Don't call me directly. You guys come to a solution together. You email me what's going on, and I'll sign off on it. Yes. Don't call me, and then I got to try to explain to him. Sometimes it gets too technical. And then I'm like, well, let me call him back because maybe I didn't explain it well or something like that. And then we're going back and forth. Well, those hours in between, I'm trying to go back and forth with them. That's opportunity for to say like, oh, well, we got confused. We communicated this, even if it was put in writing. So when they communicate with directly, they work well together. I don't have to be on site. That saves me a ton of time. My time's, worth, at least 4 figures an hour alone right there, probably 5 figures an hour. And so those are the things that I'm always kind of on. So I don't really think, I guess, about like, oh my goodness. I think it's just a lesson I've learned so many times that I know the cheapest guy is not the cheapest guy.
Right.
Like I'll give you another example. Like I had a deal where my electrical contractor actually died in the middle of the project from COVID. So I'm not trying to go political. I'm just, that's what happened with it. And I got screwed because the city's like, hey, we need to approve this before we pour the concrete over it. My concrete guy is like, I can't come back for 2 months. And so I was like, okay. So I called the guy that did some residential work with me. He was, licensed, but he just was in over his head. And so we go out there and I'm like, hey, I need this done by this time. Okay, I get it. And then we go out there and there's trenches all over my storage facility. Like, why do you trench out my storage facility? I got my excavator who's got like $1 million equipment saying, hey, I can't drive over that trench. I got tenants that are saying, hey, I can't access my unit. And he's like, oh yeah, well, I wanted to just do all the trenching today because it'll save you one permanent inspection fee, which will save you $200. And I'm like, you're trying to save me $200. You just cost me like thousands of dollars of hassle. I asked you, we talked about just trenching just this one section. And then the rest of the section we'll do later because I could care less about the $200. But he just didn't have that mindset. He didn't realize like he's never worked with somebody that their time is worth so much or the project had that much magnitude that he didn't realize that $200 savings end up turning into like a $10,000 loss. And so you got to also work with those people that understand that mindset too as well. If they value their time or your time like that too as well, they're not the type of right person for you to deal with too as well. Like I have guys that say, hey, you're going to have to go back and basically like pick up that traffic cone. I'm like, dude, I live out of state. I'm not driving 18 hours. I'm not flying in to remove a traffic cone. Can't you just remove it for me? And he's like, oh, I got to charge you $30 an hour. I'm like, just do it. And he's like, oh, okay, well, I got to do this. And I'm like, dude, just do it. Like, I could care less. But I mean, sometimes you deal with contractors that just don't understand that. And that's another reason why it's nice to work commercial, because when I work commercial, now I work with residential, I pay commercial pricing. If somebody wants to ask me for my referral for an electrician, I'm like, I can send them over to you, but they're going to give you I'm going to do this only because Charlie price, but it's still not a good price because I don't want to do it. I'm just doing it because he asked me to. Whereas my residential guys are dealing with people that are very conscious about price all the time because that's all they're focused on. So those are the things that like I think I've inherently already learned that other people haven't learned yet. So I don't really think about those things that you mentioned. I just know it already because it's like ingrained in my thinking.
Yeah, the story that you talked about before about getting the engineer, the contractor. I just went through a nightmare like that. There was like 6 of us just trying to coordinate these calls and just going back and forth. There was so much time being wasted. We're doing a development outside of Charlotte, 145 doors, doing modular. So we had to add the modular and people on there. The engineer it was such a waste of time. But do you actually? So most of your stuff that you do is it mainly development for the storage facilities?
It's a combination. For storage, it is development because we have so much value add from doing that. How we structure our deals with our investors when we do have investors, we don't have them every single deal, is that normally I waive my building construction management fee to basically get more equity. So if you invest like in a typical syndication, a lot of times it's a 37 blend. They get a 2% asset management fee. They get a realtor commission. They get all these fees. My deals are not structured that way. My deals are normally structured where I take 50% of the deal with my partner, which is way more, but then my partner and I barely have any fees. So like I did a $3.3 million construction deal where I charged a $30,000 construction fee, which is like nothing. But I did that because I wanted 50% equity versus 30% equity. But also I align more with my investors now, right? I don't make anything until you make money now. Whereas like you might get another deal and they're like, oh, well, they got 30% of the deal and you got 50%. I'm like, okay, fine. Well, we can do it that way too. I'll charge you a 2% asset management fee. I'll charge you a 3% realtor fee. I'll make close to $1 million up front on it. And we can do it that way too. Which one do you want? So, and then that, obviously that's why also my investors that come to me, they understand those nuances. They understand that we're doing it our way because we feel more aligns with our clients. And also because I was in private equity, I had 6% of a $130 million company. Absolutely hated it. I had 15 calls a week. I got calls to talk about calls. And really what I realized is that, okay, I got $7 million of equity from this company, or I could do 2 deals, 13 million, and take half of that. And then that's way less headache for me. It's way less work. So we're not super high volume. We do a high volume of consulting. We're just focused on smaller, bigger deals with more equity. And then I can basically spend more time with my family.
Oh, now you're talking the language. Guys, for those who are listening to this and want to know more about this, you can connect with Charlie through his YouTube channel. He has a lot of good stuff. I just, one of my assistants, I said, hey, look up right now. I said, hey, look him up real quick. I want all the YouTubes on him. And he's on a lot of different podcasts and different people. The philosophy he has is, it's probably the easiest and simplest way for you to get involved in real estate investing on a commercial level. And this is how I know it, because one, I'm doing it myself pretty much the same way. And a lot of the stuff when he says the 50%, basically it's kind of like a sweat equity type deal for those who don't understand that coming from single family. It's really that mentality. And so what happens with your lender is when he says he aligns with his clients, he's aligning with these lenders who are coming in saying, hey, look, I'm going to put $3 million, $2 million on a project, sometimes $10 million on a project. Where's your skin in the game? And you're going, no, I'm not really doing anything either. Like I'm making a little bit of money to pay for this cost and some service fees that I already have to pay for. Right. And so what I want to do is make money also. And so we have on our mobile home parks and stuff, on the RV parks and mobile home parks, this is kind of the structure that we use also. And because the money just goes back to the property in a sense, and we want that property to be successful, and you start sapping money. And I've seen this so many times where that initial investor is really sapping money, Charlie, from those businesses. And you can tell by I'm 41 years old. I've seen a lot of life. I've done a lot of different things, and and I study people. You could tell just by learning who Charlie is through this of going, Charlie's probably never going to do that in his whole life. Why? Because he started off by saying, hey, this is how I invested myself, right? This is how I went into my properties. I took 50% of my W-2 income and put it into the properties. And then I took the other money and I put it into the properties and just kept that machine going. And so it's a different style if you have come from a place of wholesaling or flipping or doing a single family world, and you want to transfer into doing bigger commercial type things. This is how you're going to go about doing it the most effective way without getting burnt, right? Without putting and over leveraging yourself, getting involved in syndications that you have no idea what you're doing. So that's one of those things. If you are experienced, you can tell that there's different worlds, right? And so that's what's so cool about hearing Charlie doing it, because I align a lot with what Charlie's talking about. And I really like what you're saying about just when you're talking about with these engineers and saving time. One of the things I've realized in my business, and maybe you can dig in a little bit more, is I haven't put, it sounds like you have, I haven't put like a dollar amount on every minute of the different assets of our business, but it seems like you're definitely in tune with going, you know what, man, I would just rather not. I started doing that. I don't even show up to most of our flips whenever we're doing it. Even our parks, I have the general contractor we have a whole video system set up to where he does video and we're watching them and we're doing this other stuff. And then that's it. And decisions are being made in rapid pace because I just, I got 3 kids. They're playing soccer. I want to be hanging out with them after hours. I don't want to be taking that contractor call when they're on their way to the supply store after hours, right? Going, hey, by the way, this didn't work out, and we need to go pick up a whatever for the I don't know, the tractor broke down or these other things. I'm like, look, that's on you guys. Whatever you need, fine. But we need to get going in a rapid pace. So that being said, what have you noticed by doing this as far as your business wise? Are you going, wow, now that I have this time, I can spend more time in acquisition? Or are you going, what are you spending your extra time doing now that you have more time by just delegation?
Yeah, so you actually tied on it, and on like I know the value of my time. I know the value. So each aspect of my business, I know how much that makes for our business on an hourly basis. And so I might have a portion of my business that has a lot of income, but it's a lot significant amount of my investment and time. So I've always done an exercise focusing on impact to the business. So, but I recently added another one because my dad moved into us last year. And pretty much I got completely taken away from the business for like 2 months. Like I pretty much got to see what happens when I walk away from my business. And so then what I realized is like I need to outsource even more tasks. So pretty much what I did was I put everything in my life I do, from doing laundry to like some light bookkeeping, checking bank statements, to building construction management. And I basically, with my assistance of my VA, my assistant, and my wife, calculated how much am I making as far as return on time on that. And basically from there, then I looked at, okay, which one of these do I want to outsource? So I outsourced like some really personal bookkeeping stuff that honestly, even though from a time, money perspective, it makes sense to do, I just didn't like it because I felt like I was losing touch with that. But then I outsourced cleaning. So like I pretty much don't clean anything in the house more, just call the cleaners out. We're in the process of even potentially outsourcing to a chef, and also outsourcing laundry, even though I do like doing laundry. But then one of the things that we also came to the conclusion for is that the brokerage is pretty good amount of money to the business, but it is very low return on time. And so essentially we've invested zero money into our business, even though it's still growing. But if the business basically starts to decline there, we're not going to invest in more time. So all our money that we're investing in is pretty much into either building construction management or basically syndications, because that is the greatest return on my time. So that's how I organize my time, is that I don't want to do more brokerage because it's a very time intensive and it's only like, $1,200 an hour for me. Whereas if I go into building construction management, my time there is over $10,000 an hour. So why wouldn't I just do one more hour a week of building construction management at $10,000 an hour versus 10 more hours a week at $1,000 an hour in brokerage? So that's kind of how I prioritize that.
So one of the things that I want to hint on that I've noticed also is when you're saying your brokerages, have you noticed this development of you becoming a different business owner, right? Like you develop over time and you're going, man, this just doesn't matter anymore. The stuff that used to be powerful no longer is powerful. And that's just something I've learned from my business coaches throughout the years of like, at the end of each year, you're kind of reassessing anyways, going, do I want to take this into the new year? Is this going to get me to where I want to go? Do you think that there is an addiction? This is kind of like a unique area that we talk about in the power play of like how to just be more effective with your life, right? How to be effective as a power player. And you're definitely a power player. Do you think that there's addiction now that you're kind of saying this about your brokerage, of people just going, yeah, but it's going, I'm doing stuff, I'm busy, I'm going about it. And there's not enough slowing down. I'm going, yeah, but did you add up like how much are you really making out of these thousands or hundreds of hours that you're putting into this stuff, sometimes 100 hours a month, right? Of just fielding calls and do this other stuff. Are you noticing that? And that's why you're like, oh, like, wait a minute. This is kind of like, it's a rat race, but you don't know you're on it.
Yeah. So I had a client that we kind of had this discussion with. It was a client that I really didn't want to take on, but it was a friend of a family member. And I asked them to do this exercise. That essentially was the one I do that. Okay, write down all your goals and let's just make it simple. In the next 24 hours, which of these goals that you accomplish will impact your life the most? Because they were a really, really high producing realtor, probably making $200,000, $300,000 a year. And there basically was like to create passive income so I don't feel like I'm a slave to my business. And so then I took it one step further because I also felt this way too as well. Was that your goal 10 years ago? And they're like, yes. I'm like, so then what keeps getting in the way of what the goal that's going to most impact your life? I'm like, well, the brokerage just keeps doing that. And so then what we came to the conclusion is that your brokerage is preventing you from basically your dream. Like, one of my favorite movies is Up in the Air. I'm not sure if you guys ever saw that movie, but there's a scene in the movie where he's talking to a guy because he's firing him. And he's basically like, how much did he pay you to give up your dream? And then the guy's like, well, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I saw you had a French culinary background. And the guy basically was like $14,000. Like I couldn't turn up that money. But he gave up his dream. He never became the chef he wanted to. And so the guy's like, well, look at this opportunity of you being laid off as an opportunity to finally produce to realize your dream. People lose sight of that. Like I find people are really always forward looking. But if you just look back 5 years at your goals and see like, wow, I didn't accomplish those goals. I thought I accomplished my goal because I was a super successful realtor making $200,000 a year. But my goal was actually to create passive income, but I didn't have time to do it because I was being a realtor. And so that was the difficulty that we've kind of run into as well. So the only brokerage we really do in the house is because a client that we do many other services for comes to us. If you refer to me like a billionaire client or something like that and said, hey, they want to buy a lot of real estate, we probably would still say no to them. And that surprised a lot of people too as well, because I've had billionaire clients, and I can tell you billionaire clients come with billionaire expectations, and I don't want to be working for a billionaire, to be honest. That's just how it works. I mean, like it's not what people think it is. And so if people can prioritize that and really make sure that their actions align with those priorities, even when money is coming in, trying to pull them away from that, that focus is what will allow them to be a power player in real estate, essentially.
Nice. Good stuff. So when you're saying you do consulting, is that like consulting for other, like say for somebody that's looking to do a storage facility in say Atlanta? Is that what is something on those lines? You kind of dive into that a little bit?
We kind of consult on a lot of things. The easiest way to tell how good we are at what we're consulting on is based on how much I charge. If storage, I'm charging between $1,300 and $1,800 an hour because we built and planned over 3 million square feet. If somebody hired me to consult on an assisted living facility, that might be a few $100 an hour because we've only done a little bit in that sector, but it's an area I want to grow. Early on, why I got so successful in self-storage, I think, is because I went to, so like Gabe, let's say that you guys, let's say that I'm 24 years old and I want to get into self-storage. I basically would, and let's say I've worked for a self-storage operator for like 1 year. And let's say that you have a 100,000 square foot facility that is 30% under market, but you don't want to deal with Johnny and his mom saying, hey, I can't pay today's rent. Why are you raising the rent on me $10 because they got your personal cell phone number, or they're on a soccer team with your son or whatnot. I come in and I basically become the bad guy and say, like, just do this, okay? Pay me $10,000 and I'm going to manage this facility for 3 months to you, and I'm going to get that $10,000 back to you for rent raises. So I basically just doing prove it deals across the board. Like, let me show you what I can do. And I gave them a price that was so cheap that like, it was like, okay, why wouldn't I do this deal? Of course, I'll take a deal with Charles because I know he's a hustler. And then what happened is then I did that deal one more time. My fee went up a little bit. I did it again. And then before you know it, now I've done so much in self-storage now people aren't questioning that. Now I don't need to prove myself in that. So that's kind of how I've branched my consulting side of the business, is that if I want to get in consulting with assisted living, I'll invest heavily in that education. And then once I'm feeling comfortable with that, I'll take on more projects. And as I take on more projects, then because I also realize I'm learning more on my assisted living projects than I am my storage. I probably learn 1 or 2 small things on a self-storage project, every project. I do learn something, but it's there. Whereas assisted living, especially if I go out of state, I might learn more. So that's how I've structured the consulting business, is that, if I want to get into assisted living, then I'll transition that into a role where I focus basically my time and effort on that, knowing that my return on money is not good enough. If I really just want to focus on self-storage and making money, then I'll focus on the self-storage side because I don't have as much work to put in there because I have that proven track record there. And then to be honest, some people might say like, well, wait, so you're kind of talking about guru stuff before you're a guru. I'm like, well, yes, to some degree, but if you're brand speaking new, I'm further ahead of you, that doesn't mean you can't learn from me. It just it means that in self-storage, I'm way, way ahead of you. So you have to pay a lot more for it. Whereas maybe in assisted living right now, I'm not as far ahead of you, even though I'm working with one of the largest operators in the country too. So.
Great stuff. Well, we're almost coming to an end. I want to ask one last question. We always ask the guests this stuff. So, if you're going back in time and anything that changed your life, and we call it like, what was the biggest power move that really changed your life looking backwards? What do you think that was?
I'll keep it to one, but and I try to be kind of consistent with advice I've given in the past. But I had a mentor that is a centimillionaire, so over $100 million. And I was texting them a lot, like 10 o'clock at night, asking questions because they just knew everything. They were kind of my point of contact. And then eventually he just started ignoring me. I'm like, hey, I'm not sure you got your contact information. So eventually I saw him like outside and I kind of was talking to him and he just flat gave me this advice. I'm like, Charles, I'm going to give you advice I hope you take to heart, but you're disrespecting my time. I don't know how he said it, but he basically said that you're asking me questions that if you would just spend 3 hours on Google finding it, I don't care if you spend 9 hours finding it on Google, you could find the answer. Instead, you're asking me because I can answer it in 5 minutes. But then the problem, though, is that 5 minutes of my time is worth like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. And you're valuing my time at your time, which is like 20 or 30 bucks an hour. So that's why I say, going kind of back to that example, that self-storage operator I'd go to, I do a prove it deal with them. Value the people that you want to network at their time. Show them value on what their time is worth. And that's where you will really build partnerships. That's how you'll get clients. That's how you'll win relationships.
100%. Guys, this is golden information. People ask me sometimes, dude, how are you able to get into the door so quick? And how are you able to just build rapport so fast? And I'm like, I literally look at people as if they're like, well, I value my time a lot now. But before, when I didn't value anything, I was holding everybody at a very high standard going, I don't want to suck up your time. Just give me 3-4 things to do. I'll go do them. I'll bring them back to you. I'll even put it in the email. I don't even need to talk to you. Just give me 3 or 4 things to do and I'll update you through email. And as I would do that with a couple key players, they are now, I have a call with one of them today and he's built multiple companies and one of them, another guy is a lender to a $300 million company and he does lending. And I'm like, those people grow up over time too. Right, Charles? Like that's the other part about this beautiful business is that as you can do this and get into that door, get through that front door, those other people, imagine knowing Charles whenever he was, 10 years ago and you built that relationship and now you can call him up and go, it's a different type of conversation. You still value his time, but you guys are entering the conversation on a different level over time and the resources develop. And this is the power. And I think that most people only look at the initial, what can I get within 6 months and not going, this thing might happen over the next 2 to 10 years. And how can we build that relationship? And that's really the gold. So, man, dude, we can keep going on because I love this conversation about valuing the time and how that really has helped me build my business and scale my business. Mark and I have another phone call to do just about us scaling our businesses in this next era. And just a lot of it's talking about how can we collapse time and bring that future down to now, right? And not giving up the stuff, like you said, 5 years ago, how much did it cost to give up your dreams? So this is really good, dude. I appreciate you. So you're on YouTube. How else can we get a hold of you?
YouTube is probably where a lot of people can get a lot of advice. If you all the time, if I respond back to you and you ask me a very generic question, one, I'm going to probably ignore you because I get literally 10 to 20 contacts like that. But if you do get a response from me, most of the time I'm referring you to my YouTube channel because the question you're asking has been answered on my YouTube channel. So if you just want sheer information, especially detailed information, that's where I would say to go. If you want to follow me, you can find me pretty easily just by Googling my name. Either Instagram, Charles C Kao. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, but I would say by far the YouTube channel. And if you're interested in investing, then you can find my information on my YouTube channel as well. So.
Game on. Thanks a lot, guys, for joining us. See you, Mark. See you, Charlie. We'll talk to you guys later. Peace.
Cool. Thanks.
This has been another episode of Real Estate Power Play. guiding real estate entrepreneurs to a brighter future. If you liked what you heard, consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast or follow us on YouTube at Real Estate Power Play.